Hi, I'm Karen, and this is the Mental Health Hope You're Not Alone podcast. This space is all about breaking the stigma of mental health, where we'll share personal stories, helpful online resources, and meaningful insights, all with one goal in mind: to remind you that you are not alone in your mental health journey. Hello, and welcome to the first ever podcast of Mental Health Hope You're Not Alone. I'm your host, Karen, and I'm so excited to be here. This is something that I have been planning and putting together for probably a couple of months, but this journey that actually led me here has been going on for probably about, I'd say, 6, 7 years. And back in 2018 and 2019, actually, it's probably more like 2019, I started going through anxiety and depression. And in 2020, where I started feeling some physical symptoms, and during that time the world was shut down due to COVID, and so for about 3 days I was struggling with some physical symptoms of feeling nauseous. And what led me to that was I was going through some work issues and not really putting the two and two together at the time. I knew that I was really stressed out at work and that there were things that were going on with work, but over the course of the last several years, I have been able to realize that my anxiety and depression and PTSD all stems from a work situation that I was in several years ago. But back in 2020, I started developing some physical symptoms. Like I said, I was nauseous for 3 days, and that's what led me to having a doctor's appointment. I made a doctor's appointment because of that, and it was a telehealth appointment because back in 2020, not many of us were leaving the house. And my doctor at the time said a lot of people are dealing with this, the anxiety aspect of it. For me, I knew I was going through some work issues, and so I more or less attributed what I was going through, that feeling nauseous, to that. And so I started my journey, and it's been a long journey since then. My life every day is a roller coaster, and I'm sure, as many of you know out there that are dealing with anxiety and depression, that the journey is very much a roller coaster. And I was diagnosed with anxiety, depression, and PTSD, and that's the mental aspect, but I also have a lot of physical symptoms that have been a problem over the years. And initially it started out with the feeling nauseous, but as I moved through the last few years, I've had a lot of other physical symptoms. For example, I have vertigo, migraines, heart palpitations, and things like that because of all the things that I've been going through with respect to anxiety and depression. And that's what led me to wanting to start this podcast. It was about 2 or so months ago, or probably actually longer than that now. But I ended up meeting somebody that, when we got to know each other and we started sharing our stories with respect to anxiety and depression, I realized that we were going through a very similar journey. Hers was very much one that stemmed from work, and a lot of the symptoms and things that we were dealing with, both physical and just with respect to the anxiety and depression, were very similar. And for the first time, I actually was really happy that I was able to find somebody that I could compare stories with and know that person understood everything that I was saying to them. And that got me to thinking that it took me 6 years or so of really feeling alone in this journey. And I met somebody, and how wonderful it felt for me. Then there has to be other people out there that feel the same and feel alone in their mental health journey. There's a lot of stigma that comes with mental health, and there's also a lot of negative attention, I would say, that comes with mental health. And that's really why there's several reasons why I wanted to start this podcast, but one of which is that I found this person and how wonderful it felt to know that I had something in common with this person and they actually understood it. And so I thought, if I'm out there feeling this way, then so are probably a lot of other people. And so I thought, let's create a community of people that are dealing with anxiety, depression, or in really any mental health issue. And let's create a community together and walk through this journey together. And hopefully on this journey, we'll begin to start to heal. I know that it's taken me a long time to get to this point, and I'm not anywhere near where I want to be with respect to healing. But I do know that I am moving towards that. And so I want to extend that invitation to others, and let's try and do this together. And so I think with this podcast, sharing stories, providing education to others, breaking that stigma, it's huge that we provide and we talk about mental health, because it's such a quiet subject that there's a lot of negativity with it, and because of that there's this huge stigma around it. And being able to talk with others and getting the education out there, hopefully we can break that stigma. But so anyway, back to the podcast, with this idea, I just thought, let's create this community together. Let's do something together and move through this journey together, and hopefully try to find a way to heal together. And so if you notice that the logo that I've chosen is an owl with a green ribbon for mental health in its beak, and that is actually a tattoo that I have on my arm for when my journey began about 6 years ago. And at the time, I didn't know what was going on. I knew that I felt a certain way. I knew I had physical symptoms, but I didn't really know what was going on. And then about 2 or 3 years later, I realized, and after doing a lot of research and things, I started realizing that I have been dealing with anxiety my whole life. I didn't know that's what it was, but I was working through life, or running through life, with undiagnosed anxiety. And then about 2 or 3 years ago was really probably when I was at my lowest or at my worst with respect to certainly the depression. But my anxiety, as does my depression, is very much a roller coaster. But I needed an everyday reminder that mental health is, that there's hope with mental health. As long as I'm doing the work that I need to do in order to heal, there's always hope with mental health. And so that's really where the title and the logo came from, was the mental health hope, because there's always hope to heal, and there's always that moving forward. And that you're not alone is exactly how it sounds. I want everyone to know that this is our journey, not just mine, it's ours. And this is something that we can do together. And so with this podcast, I want to be able to share stories, bring people on, interview people that maybe they're a subject matter expert with respect to this, and provide that education piece and hopefully break the stigma. With this, today, I'd actually like to just dive right in with that education piece. And I have an article here from the Cleveland Clinic, and it talks about the differences between anxiety and depression. And initially what was told to me is that anxiety is about worrying about the future, where depression is about worrying about the past. And that was really all I knew. I didn't know much more than that. I started doing some research, and I thought, I'm maybe not only going through this, but let's get others involved and let's share that information. And so today, let's just talk about the basics of what anxiety and depression is. And with this article, there's a lot of different things with respect to anxiety and the symptoms that people are feeling. And I'm just going to go through this list and talk about each one of them, and along with how they may impact me. And hopefully somebody out there in the audience can relate to that. So let's just go right in here. So the very first thing on this list is persistent and severe worrying. And I can tell you for a fact, that is absolutely something that I do. I will tell you right now, I am recording this on Friday night, and the last 2 days with respect to my work have been extremely, extremely stressful for me. And because they have triggered my anxiety from other things that have occurred during my work. So, that my anxiety and depression is based on my experience and bad issue that I was dealing with several years ago. And this is where the PTSD aspect comes in, is I am still dealing with that. And so over the last couple of days, I've had a horrible experience at work. And I have consistently thought about it since it happened. I think about it when I'm laying in bed and all the things I could have said or things I maybe did wrong, or just the list goes on. And so I absolutely do worry about things that occur, and it will keep me up at night. Overthinking things, absolutely. I will, just like this situation here recently, I have been thinking about it over and over again since it occurred. And I will say this, that I am actually having physical symptoms from this interaction that I had recently, to where I have been dealing with a headache, and that affects my eyes and how that's uncomfortable. And it's just, again, it's just about that aspect is about the physical part of it. So anyway, moving on here, envisioning worst case scenarios. Yes, I do that. I pick a particular seat in an aircraft when I'm flying just for that reason. I typically pick one in the back because they claim that's the safest. And so I don't have any information on that. It's just something that was told to me years ago. Whether or not it's true, I don't know. But I just know that's why I do that. Obsessing over situations or outcomes, absolutely. Like I said, over the last couple of days, I have absolutely been obsessed with this interaction that I had at work. It's hard for me to let it go, and I've thought about it a lot. Indecisiveness. Yes, that is something that I deal with. Back in 2000, prior to 2019, so basically 2018 and before, I was one that was very organized and would plan things down to the very last detail. So let's just give you an example here. If I were to go on vacation and I was wanting to travel, and I would plan out everything down to the very last second. I would plan out every piece of clothing that I was taking. I would plan out all the different shoes, and ladies, this, if you like shoes, trying to decide all the different types of shoes that you want to take. And I would plan out exactly what outfit I was going to wear on what day, and everything that was going to occur during that day in a very timely manner. And even sometimes I would lay out each outfit and put a piece of paper with the day on it. So this outfit's for Tuesday, this outfit's for Wednesday, and so on and so forth. And now I have a really hard time making decisions. Now I am able to make decisions with respect to the job that I have, because it's something that I actually have confidence in. But my everyday life, I have a really hard time making a decision. And my house is a perfect example of that. So I bought this house almost 2 years ago now. I guess about a year and a half. And while I'm in the process of upgrading it, I have had a hard time making decisions on how to upgrade it. And it took me a long time to decide what color I wanted for my cabinets, because I'm restaining cabinets, what type of paint color I wanted in certain rooms. It was really hard for me to make a decision. And I've been working on this house for probably about a year now, and I believe in my heart and soul that the reason it's taking me so long is because I have trouble making decisions. So anyway, next thing on this list is fear. Yes, I have fear. I have a lot of fear. And I don't want to go into a lot of details right now, because I think we can talk about this in another episode. But I have become quite reclusive in my life. Before, I used to have friends and I would go out all the time. I was very active. I'm very outgoing. And while I still am very outgoing for the most part, I'm certainly not as interactive with my friends as I used to be. I'm very much okay with staying at home. And honestly, that's not really me. I love going out. I love seeing people. I love being social and having those relationships with people. But it's the fear of going out is what kind of keeps me inside. The next thing here on the list is the inability to relax. And I can tell you, I do not have a problem with that whatsoever. I can relax just fine. Now, there are times that I feel very anxious and that maybe sleeping can be difficult. And if I'm really anxious and sleeping is difficult, I tend to pace. I will pace in my bedroom back and forth until I start to feel less anxious. And there are even some things that you can do or I can do that kind of help with that. And I don't want to talk again. I don't want to talk about that right now because I do plan on talking about that later. But there are things that we can do to help ease the anxiety. And for me, one of those things is to pace. Feelings of restlessness, yes, I do feel that way. Comes with not being able to sleep and wanting to pace. I just feel like I could run a marathon and I just can't relax. Like my mind just will not shut up. And then trouble focusing and physical agitation. And yes, I do have a major problem with that. When I'm at my height with respect to the anxiety, for sure, there's a problem that I really have a hard time focusing. And it can affect my work because I have a hard time focusing. Other things here talks about the physical symptoms, which it talks about muscle tension. Yes, that's one. Chest tightness, which I don't necessarily have the chest tightness, but I do have heart palpitations and from that. And so I can feel my heart flutter a little bit when I'm having some anxiety issues. Feeling tired and fatigued. Yes, I think for me, it's if I'm like really anxious and I'm starting to relax a little bit and be a little bit more level, then it's after I've had that really high anxiety where I start to feel really tired and want to sleep. Also, too, I tend to, with respect to the depression aspect of it, I tend to resort to sleeping, and it goes hand in hand with the depression and anxiety where wanting to sleep works out well for me. Is that because when I'm most anxious and after coming down, I tend to want to sleep anyways. And then the very last thing here, or I guess I'm sorry, last couple of things are heart palpitations, what we just talked about, and shortness of breath. So moving on to depression. So I do have a lot of symptoms with respect to depression, and one thing here is the feelings of being sad or sadness and hopelessness. And yes, I do have that. There are days where I don't want to get out of bed, and I feel like even being a part of the day can be difficult, and so I tend to want to just sleep the day away and just not be a part of the world. Loss of interest. Yes, I can tell you for a fact that is one of the things that's high on my list. So I mentioned back in 2018, during that time and prior to that, I was very active. I started running in 2010, I believe. I think it was August of 2010 where I started. I actually did my first 5K, and my interest exploded into wanting to continue to be active. And so by 2012, I became a triathlete, and I was just nonstop of being active. I was doing several road races. I was doing maybe 2 triathlons a year, a lot of organized rides, and I was on a swim team that we practiced two to three times a week, and it was a ball. I absolutely loved everything about it. I made a lot of good friends, especially on my swim team, and it was great. I absolutely loved it. And I will say that during that time, I think it was about 2017, 2018 I've had 2 ankle surgeries on my left ankle and 1 ankle surgery on my right, completely unrelated to each other, as I broke my foot almost a couple years ago now. And so it's been a hard recovery since then. But it's this cycle that I've been going in. I absolutely love being active, but I'm having a really hard time getting over that hump of the loss of interest. I want to be able to walk. I want to be able to even run. I still love riding my bike, but yet I haven't pulled it out from the basement in God knows how long. And so it's hard for me to move on from that. And that's actually another reason why I wanted to start this podcast, is I did lose interest in all that. And it's really not something that it's not me to feel that way. And so it's been really hard over the last 5-6 years not being active and not having that interest anymore. And so just over the last, I'd say, about 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks now, I've lost track, where I've started this Be Normal campaign. And this is strictly for me, but I want to invite you on this journey as well. And what I mean by be normal is not be normal with respect to what society thinks or what the society thinks you should be, but it's more about being normal. Who were you before you started this journey? And for me, that was being somebody who was extremely active. I really enjoyed the person that I was back then, and I am not at all that person now. And so I want to be able to find maybe little bits and pieces of that person. Now, I know for a fact that I will never ever be that person again because of everything that's happened over the last 5 or 6 years. But what I want to do is take things that I used to love and try and bring them into this new normal for me and find a way to love them again. And it's still very hard. And what I mean by the being normal is what I keep telling myself is be normal. For example, if there's something that's sitting on the stairs that I need to take upstairs, don't let it sit there for a few months. And I mean that, for a few months. And pick it up. And so I'll tell myself as I'm walking by, be normal, because that's the person that I used to be. I used to not let things sit around for long periods of a time. And also, too, with the be normal is trying to get out and go walk and be active again. Over the last several years, I've gained an obscene amount of weight because of this anxiety and depression and the not being active. And so I want to be able to find my way back to that lifestyle where I am more active, but I am really struggling at getting there. And so I am trying to get up every day and walk my dog because we love going on walks, especially around the neighborhood. But there are days like today where I had no interest. So I know for a fact that this is going to be a really long journey, and it's okay to fail. If I don't do it today, I can get up tomorrow and start over. And so join me on my Be Normal campaign and find little sparks of love that you had before and try and bring them into your life today and see if that gets you down your road of healing. I'm hoping that it will be the same for me. So anyway, let's continue on this list here with depression. So trouble sleeping. I do have trouble sleeping, but that's more so with the anxiety. With depression, I don't have trouble at all. But I know that that's just my experience. I'm sure there are people out there that have trouble sleeping with respect to depression. Feeling exhausted, yes. There are times where if I'm at my worst with depression, it is hard for me to get out of bed because number one, I don't feel like I said, being a part of the world, but also two, I'm just really tired. And so I tend to sleep the day away. The next thing here on this list is a change in appetite. And I'd say yes, not necessarily with respect to not wanting to eat, but I'm one that likes to fill that void with food. And I've gained a lot of weight over the last several years. Matter of fact, I initially, when I first started wanting to do this podcast, I absolutely did not want to do a recording with a video. I absolutely was not wanting to put myself out there physically for people to see what I looked like because I'm embarrassed. And for example, I didn't go to my class reunion, my 30-year class reunion last year. Do the math, you can tell how old I am. Because I was so afraid. Yeah, I was embarrassed, and I'm still embarrassed. But I also thought, again, I am probably not alone in this journey with respect to wanting to eat to fill that void of depression. And so there are probably others out there. So I thought, here I am. Let's just put myself out there and have other people relate. So here I am with the video on and everything, as uncomfortable as it makes me feel. I especially too am one that's a private person, and showing the inside of my house, this is my office, is a little uncomfortable for me. Again, it's all about being vulnerable and letting people in and realizing that we all have symptoms and things that are probably similar, and that we can go through this journey together and relate to each other. Okay, so next here on the list is unexplained physical pain and aches. And I won't say I necessarily have unexplained physical pain, but like I said earlier, the things, especially with the anxiety, are my physical symptoms of vertigo and feeling nauseous, and then also to the heart palpitations and then the migraines. And I say that they're migraines, they're not diagnosed migraines, but it is to the point like where when my physical symptoms with anxiety it gets really high and I have a headache. Like I said, it affects my eyes and being able to like move my eyes. So that's my part of physical aspect of it. And like I said earlier, that's what got me into the doctor and led me to start this journey. Other things here is feeling the small tasks that take extra effort. And yes, that is absolutely one of my huge things. Like I mentioned earlier, doing things around the house where leaving things around, things in my office and not taking things downstairs. And everything takes a lot of effort. But what is normal for me? And leaving things around is not normal. And so something as small as putting dishes away or having things in my office that maybe need to be downstairs and things like that can be quite overwhelming at times. And by no means am I a hoarder, but there are a lot of things around my house that could probably be put away. And I don't mean just like everyday clutter. I literally have a ladder downstairs sitting in my living room. And that's mainly because I'm in the process of redoing my house. But I could put it back. I could put it back outside where it was. So yes, feeling of small tasks take an extra effort. And it really does. Other things here, having thoughts of self-harm, feelings of worthlessness and low self-esteem. Yes, I have actually dealt with that my whole life, but especially over the last few years. And one of the reasons why I didn't want to go on my reunion, I didn't want to go looking like this. And so, yeah, it's been rough over the last few years. But so anyway, that is the list. And I do plan on providing the link below that you all can go through this and read this more in depth, but it's an article that I found from the Cleveland Clinic that I thought was really good at explaining kind of the differences between anxiety and depression. And I really appreciated the fact that it talked about the physical symptoms because that is something I think a lot of people just don't know. And it's nice to be able to see that, yes, there are physical symptoms along with the other symptoms of being anxious and so on with respect to anxiety. So anyway, so that's our first education piece for this. I'm so excited. This has been a really awesome thing over the last 2 months trying to prepare to get to this point. And I'm really thrilled that today is finally here. So I want to also talk about the podcast itself. So I do plan on hopefully putting out a podcast every 2 weeks. I'm hoping to release every podcast on a Sunday and having it every 2 weeks. And with that, we'll be talking about like stories that I can share, possibly engaging with audience members and the stories that they want to share. I'm hoping to interview people that could be subject matter experts with respect to anxiety and depression. No mental health subject is off limits. I think initially though, because my journey has to deal with anxiety and depression and PTSD, I think initially we will focus on those, but again, no subject is off limits with respect to mental health. I really want to be able to gather this community together so we can fight this together, hopefully towards the direction of healing and find your own path. So there's always that mental health hope. And I also have a Discord, which I will link below, so you can share your stories there if you'd like. And I'm going to wrap this up. This was great. This was a wonderful opportunity to start this. I'm really excited to get this going. And so join us in 2 weeks where we will take a deep dive into anxiety as to beyond what more that article says. And we'll be able to really discuss the anxiety and talk more about the physical symptoms and what anxiety is and provide that education piece along with stories. I'd really like to get some stories from people and about their journey with respect to anxiety and depression. And so again, thank you for joining me today on this very first episode of Mental Health Hope, You're Not Alone podcast. My name is Karen, and I really appreciate you joining me for the Mental Health Hope, You're Not Alone podcast. Bye bye.